The moment the hotel receptionist handed me the keycard, I had no idea that the night ahead would become one of the strangest and most unforgettable nights of my life. It was supposed to be simple. Just one night, one quiet stay, one temporary escape from everything that had been exhausting my mind for weeks. But life rarely follows simple plans, especially when strangers are involved. By the time I reached the third floor, the hallway felt unusually silent. The lights above cast a soft yellow glow, making the place feel calm, yet somehow mysterious. Room 307. That was mine. At least, that's what I thought. I slid the keycard into the slot and pushed the door open, and froze, because standing inside the room right near the window was a man I had never seen before. For a moment, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Tall, calm, dressed casually, and completely comfortable, like he belonged there. Our eyes locked instantly. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved. It felt like time had paused just to watch the confusion unfold. "You're in the wrong room," I said first, trying to sound confident even though my heart had started beating faster. He didn't panic, didn't look surprised. Instead, he slowly turned fully toward me, his expression calm, almost amused. "No," he replied quietly. "You are." That answer only made things worse. "This is room 307, I said, holding up the keycard like proof. He nodded once. "Exactly." Silence filled the room again. Then realization hit both of us at the same time. "Double booking," he muttered. I exhaled sharply. Of course. A stupid hotel mistake. One room, two strangers, no other available rooms. Perfect. Just perfect. After a quick call to the front desk, the situation became even more ridiculous. "Unfortunately, ma'am," the receptionist said politely over the phone, "we are fully booked tonight. We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience." Fully booked, meaning we had no choice. I slowly lowered the phone and looked at him again. He was leaning casually against the wall, arms crossed, looking far too relaxed for someone stuck in such an awkward situation. "Well?" he asked. "They want us to share the room," I said flatly. He nodded once, like he had expected that answer all along. "I don't bite," he added casually. "That's not comforting," I replied instantly. That made him smile slightly, and for some reason, that small smile made the room feel warmer, more tense, more alive. "Name?" he asked, extending his hand. I hesitated for a second before shaking it. "Sarah." "Adrian," he replied. His grip was firm, warm, confident, and strangely reassuring, even though he was still a complete stranger. The first hour passed awkwardly. We stayed on opposite sides of the room, pretending to be busy with our phones, occasionally glancing at each other like two people forced into an uncomfortable social experiment. But then, he broke the silence. "There's a movie on," he said casually. I looked up. "A movie?" He nodded toward the TV. Better than staring at walls. I hesitated. Watching a movie with a stranger in a shared hotel room? Definitely weird, but also better than silence. "Fine," I said finally. "Just a movie." He grabbed the remote and scrolled through the options before selecting something with a dark, suspenseful theme. The lights in the room felt dimmer as the screen lit up. Soft shadows danced across the walls. And somehow, the distance between us didn't feel as large anymore. At first, we sat far apart. Careful. Awkward. Like two people trying to respect invisible boundaries. But as the movie continued, the tension on screen slowly matched the tension in the room. There were quiet moments, soft laughter, random comments about the movie, and slowly, without realizing it, the space between us became smaller. Not intentionally, not dramatically, just naturally. At one point, he shifted slightly closer, reaching for the bowl of snacks placed between us. Our hands brushed, just for a second. But that single touch sent a strange warmth through my body. Unexpected, unexplained, dangerous. I pulled my hand back quickly, pretending not to notice. But he noticed. Of course he did. "Relax," he said softly. "I'm not going to kidnap you." I rolled my eyes. That's exactly what a kidnapper would say. That made him laugh quietly. And somehow, that laugh made the atmosphere feel lighter, yet heavier at the same time. Because beneath the jokes, there was tension. The kind that builds slowly, like a storm forming in the distance. And then came the moment that changed everything. A sudden loud sound in the movie made me flinch slightly. Instinctively, without thinking. I leaned a little closer. Too close. Close enough to feel his warmth. Close enough to notice how steady his breathing was. Close enough to realize this situation was no longer just awkward. It was something else. Something dangerous. Something thrilling. And when he turned slightly toward me, our eyes. 11:12 a.m., March 25th, 2026. Met again. This time. Neither of us looked away. The movie continued playing in the background, but neither of us paid attention anymore. Because the real tension was no longer on the screen. It was between us. And that was the moment I realized something terrifying. Sharing a room with a stranger wasn't the dangerous part. Feeling comfortable around him? That was the real danger. 11:33 a.m., March 25th, 2026. Feeling comfortable around him. That was the real danger. Because comfort with a stranger isn't supposed to happen this fast. And yet, there I was, sitting just inches away from someone I had met barely an hour ago, feeling a strange mix of calm and nervousness that refused to make sense. The movie kept playing in the background, but the sound now felt distant, like white noise fading behind the louder rhythm of my heartbeat. I shifted slightly on the bed, trying to create a bit more distance. But he noticed. Of course he noticed. "You okay?" Adrian asked quietly. His voice wasn't teasing this time. It was softer, careful, like he didn't want to scare me away. "Yeah," I replied quickly. "Just tired." That wasn't entirely true. I wasn't tired. I was aware. Aware of the warmth radiating from him. Aware of how close we were sitting. Aware of how strange this entire night had become. And if you enjoy stories filled with tension, unexpected twists, and dark romantic moments that feel almost too real, don't forget to subscribe now, because trust me, this night was only just beginning. He leaned back slightly, resting against the headboard, arms relaxed. "You don't trust me," he said casually. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I looked at him. "Should I?" He smirked faintly. "Probably not." That answer made me laugh quietly. Not because it was funny, but because it was honest. And honesty from a stranger felt strangely dangerous. Silence settled between us again, heavier this time. The kind of silence filled with thoughts that neither of us said out loud. The movie reached a dramatic scene, loud music rising in the background. Without realizing it, I leaned slightly closer again, drawn by the tension on screen. Or maybe, drawn by him. At one point, his arm rested casually along the back of the bed. Not touching me, not crossing boundaries. Just there. But the presence of it felt loud, like an unspoken question hanging in the air. "Relax," he murmured softly. "You look like you're about to run." "I might," I replied. He chuckled quietly. "Fair enough." A sudden flicker from the TV screen filled the room with shadows that danced across the walls. The dim lighting made everything feel more intense, more private, more dangerous. It felt like the world outside that hotel room had disappeared completely, like nothing existed beyond those four walls. Minutes passed. Slow, heavy. And then came another moment that shifted everything. The movie reached a quiet, emotional scene. No loud sounds, No action, just silence, and music playing softly in the background. That's when I noticed something strange. His attention wasn't on the TV anymore. It was on me. I turned slightly, caught him looking, not in a creepy way, not in a careless way, but in a focused, unreadable way. What? I asked. He didn't answer immediately, just studied my face like he was trying to memorize something. You're different, he said finally. I frowned. Different how? He shrugged slightly. Most people would have demanded another room by now, or made a scene. And you think I should have? No, he replied quietly. I'm glad you didn't. Something about the way he said that made my chest tighten slightly. Not fear, not discomfort. Something else. Something warmer, something dangerous. The kind of feeling that makes you question your own judgment. The air between us felt heavier now. Charged. Like static electricity before lightning strikes. I swallowed slowly. You're staring, I said softly. Notice that, he replied. And you're not stopping. Nope. That made my heart beat faster. Not from fear, but from anticipation. And that was the moment I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just nervous anymore. I was curious. Curious about him. Curious about why his calm presence felt both comforting and dangerous at the same time. Curious about what would happen if this tension kept building. The movie reached another intense scene, loud music suddenly rising. Without thinking, I flinched slightly, and instinctively. He placed his hand gently over mine. Just for a second, a simple touch. Nothing dramatic, nothing forceful. But that single contact sent warmth rushing through my entire body. I froze, not pulling away, not reacting, just feeling the warmth of his hand against mine. You're shaking, he murmured quietly. I'm not, I whispered back. You are. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my breathing, trying to ignore how aware I had suddenly become of every small movement between us. His hand didn't tighten, didn't move further. It just stayed there. Warm, steady, calm, giving me the choice to pull away if I wanted to. But I didn't. And that scared me more than anything else. Because deep down, I knew I should have moved. I knew I should have created distance. But instead, I stayed. Still. Close. Watching the flickering light from the TV reflect in his eyes. That was when he leaned slightly closer. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was waiting for permission that I never verbally gave, but never denied either. Our faces were now only inches apart. Close enough to feel each other's breath. Close enough to feel the tension thickening between us. Tell me to stop, he murmured softly. I didn't. Not because I couldn't, but because, for reasons I didn't fully understand, I didn't want to. And in that moment, I realized something dangerous. This night was no longer about a hotel mistake. It was no longer about awkward strangers sharing a room. It had become something else. Something deeper. Something darker. Something neither of us had planned. But both of us were slowly stepping into anyway. The movie continued playing in the background. But the real story was unfolding right there between us. And the scariest part? I wasn't afraid anymore. I was curious. Curious about how far this tension would go. Curious about what would happen next. Curious about whether this strange connection between two strangers would turn into something unforgettable, or something impossible to escape. Curious about how far this tension would go. Curious about what would happen next. That curiosity was the most dangerous feeling of all, because curiosity makes people ignore their instincts. And my instincts were screaming at me to create distance. But my body didn't move. My mind didn't interrupt the moment. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, inches away from him, feeling the quiet heat of his presence filling the small space between us. Still not telling me to stop? Adrian whispered softly. His voice was low, controlled, but there was something heavier beneath it now, something harder to ignore. I swallowed slowly. My heartbeat felt loud enough to hear. I should, I murmured. But you won't, he replied calmly. That confidence again. That same calm certainty that made everything feel both safe and dangerous at the same time. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The tension stretched longer, thicker, like the air itself had grown heavier. Then, slowly, carefully, he leaned closer, not suddenly, not aggressively, just enough to close the distance that had been teasing us for the last several minutes. My breath caught slightly. My fingers tightened against the bedsheet, and when his hand gently brushed against my arm, a wave of warmth ran through me so unexpectedly that it made my thoughts blur. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't rushed. It was slow, careful, like he was testing whether I would pull away. But I didn't. And that silence between us became the loudest answer of all. The movie still played behind us, flickering shadows across the walls. But neither of us noticed anymore, because the real moment was happening right there, between us. He moved slightly closer again, his voice dropping into a quiet murmur. You're not as calm as you pretend to be, he said. I let out a quiet breath. And you're not as harmless as you pretend to be. That made him smile faintly. Fair enough. Another second passed, then another. Until finally, the moment happened. The space between us disappeared completely. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't chaotic. It was slow, careful, like two people stepping into something neither of them fully understood. And for a brief moment, everything else faded. The room, the movie, the outside world. All of it disappeared into silence. But what surprised me the most wasn't the closeness, wasn't the tension. It was the feeling that followed. Not panic, not regret, just confusion. Because this situation didn't feel like a mistake anymore. It felt intentional, like this night had been building toward this moment from the very beginning. And that realization made my chest tighten slightly. Not from fear, but from awareness. Awareness that something about Adrian still didn't make sense. Because no one stays this calm in situations like this. No one moves through moments like this without hesitation. Unless they've done it before. That thought hit me suddenly. Hard. And the warmth of the moment cooled slightly as suspicion crept back into my mind. I leaned back just enough to study his face. You do this a lot, don't you? I asked quietly. He frowned slightly. Do what? This, I replied. The calm act, the mysterious silence, the confidence. He didn't answer immediately. That hesitation was my answer. And suddenly everything about him felt different. Not dangerous, not threatening, just practiced, rehearsed. Like someone who had lived too many unpredictable nights to be surprised by anything anymore. Who are you really? I asked softly. That question changed everything. Because for the first time since we met, Adrian didn't look calm. He looked thoughtful, serious, and slightly distant. Someone who travels a lot. He replied quietly. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give. That reply didn't comfort me, not even a little. Instead, it made the silence between us feel heavier again, more uncertain, more real. Minutes passed without either of us speaking. The movie ended. The screen faded to black, and suddenly the room felt quieter than before. Too quiet, too still. I shifted slightly, sitting upright now, creating distance that hadn't existed before. And this time, he didn't stop me, didn't pull me back, didn't close the space again. Instead, he simply watched me, calm, unreadable. "You're thinking too much," he said finally. "Maybe," I replied, "but something about you doesn't feel simple." He smiled faintly. Nothing about tonight was simple. That was true. From the moment I opened that hotel door, nothing about this night had followed logic. Nothing had followed reason. And yet, here we were. Two strangers, sharing silence inside a dark hotel room. After one of the strangest nights either of us had probably ever experienced. Morning light slowly began slipping through the curtains, faint and soft. We hadn't slept. Not really. Just drifted in silence, lost in our own thoughts. And when the first rays of sunlight touched the room, reality returned. The tension faded slightly. The mystery remained. I stood up slowly, grabbing my bag. He didn't stop me, didn't question me, just watched quietly. "So this is it?" he asked calmly. I nodded once. "Yeah." Another pause. Then he said something unexpected. "You'll remember this night." I looked at him, studied his calm expression one last time, then smiled faintly. "Yeah," I replied. "I will." Not because of what happened, but because of what it revealed. About him, about myself, about how quickly strangers can become unforgettable memories. I walked toward the door slowly, hand resting against the handle, then paused, turned back slightly, and said the one thought that had been forming in my mind since everything began. "You know what the strangest part is?" He tilted his head slightly. "What?" "I walked into this room thinking it was a mistake." I paused briefly, then continued. "But now I think it happened for a reason." He didn't reply, just watched quietly. And as I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, one final realization settled into my mind. Not every dangerous moment destroys you. Some moments teach you something. Some moments wake you up. And some moments stay with you long after they end. Because nights like this don't just disappear. They become stories. Stories that feel unreal until you realize they actually happened. And if stories like this, filled with tension, mystery, dark romance, and unexpected moments, keep you hooked till the very end, make sure to subscribe now. Because trust me, some nights start with a simple mistake and end with memories you'll never forget.